You're listening to the sweet sounds of the After Movie Diner. Support us at patreon.com/After Movie Diner. Or I'll punch you in the teats. Rate and review us on iTunes, Earthling. And now, here's your host, John Cross.
Well, hello and welcome to a very special After Movie Diner. And I only say that because it's one of the few After Movie Diner episodes where I'm not being perpetually annoyed or interrupted by that Yahoo Jim Wallace. And I say Yahoo because I put it in a Facebook status earlier and he said, you should use that word more. So I'm calling him a Yahoo. I'm calling him out. He said he was looking forward to listening to the episode. So here I am just giving it to him right at the beginning of the show. And but enough about him because he's not on the episode. So instead, let's talk about the man who is on the episode, the man behind the mustache, the man behind Hold the Mayo and Be Better, the man who you should all be supporting on Patreon, and if you're not supporting on Patreon, stop listening right now! It's Mr. J. Mayo! Hello, sir.
Hello, John. Thank you for having me, and I suppose this is the point of the conversation where I butt in and take over the show as if I am Jim Wallace.
That is exactly what you do. I want rampant hypothesizing about things he couldn't possibly know about, and I want general sort of British...
All right, let me cut you off right there. Stop talking. It's some Jim time. All right, listen. Here's what's going to happen going forward. I'm going to order my dinner in the middle of our conversation. I'm going to continually cut you off. I'm going to speculate wildly. Yeah. I'm going to answer questions you didn't ask. Yeah. And I'm going to make everyone regret having me on this show. Yes. I am going to be the poorest Jim Wallace fill-in that this show has ever had, hopefully doing Jim some service or some justice by attempting to fill in his massive shoes.
So what you're saying is you're going to be such a poor approximation.
John, I'm going to go ahead and cut you off again. I'm sorry, I'm not going to do it anymore.
No, it's all good. You're going to be such a poor approximation of Jim Wallace that without really doing anything, you're going to make Jim Wallace look better at doing his co-hosting job.
Yes, that's my plan going forward, is I'm going to try to tank this as hard as possible so that everyone goes, you know what? We love Jim.
Well, listen, all joking aside, we do love Jim. And Jim does a tough job. Jim is run ragged by his corporate overlords. And so we've given him a couple of weeks off. And why not? Why not give the man just some time to get some goddamn rest, for the love of God? Which is what he's doing right now. And all the better for it, I hope. I hope he has a nice little rest, cuddles a nice little cushion, feels all rested so he can come back next week.
Well, Jim definitely deserves the time off, and I literally could never even attempt to fill his shoes here at the After Movie Diner, but I will do my best. I will not try to tank this episode, I promise. I will try to do you some justice here, Jim. Hopefully I can almost compare.
Well, he did say that you were a great guest because he messaged me earlier and he was like, I suppose I could drag my carcass off the couch and try and talk to you at about 10 p.m. tonight. I said, don't worry, I have J. Mayo doing it. Sorry if you kind of were wanting to do it because I've already made other plans. And he was like, no, Jay's a great guest, and then proceeded to write questions for you. So that's all exciting.
Well, I'm excited to answer his questions. I'm excited to hear his questions, and I'm excited to answer said questions.
Yes, indeed. But we will bring that up later when we reveal what movie we are talking about. But first up, we have an email from one of our listeners. Cue email jingle. Here comes the postman. I wonder what he has for me. There's something in his big brown sack. I wonder what could it be. Well, I hope the bills it lacks and instead brings me some listener feedback, or maybe, just maybe, a big bag of crack. Oh, here comes the postman. I wonder what he has for me. Who just goes by the name of Nick. And he says, hi guys, my name's Nick. And a while back, I stumbled across a movie I had never heard of. It completely blew me away, and so ever since I've been desperately trying to convince everyone across movie fandom to give it a shot and hopefully drag it out of complete obscurity. Do you think we're the men to do it, Jay? That's what I want to know.
If there were ever two men to do it, it is you and I, John.
It is us. The movie is called The Beast of War, also known as The Beast, from 1988. It's directed by Kevin Reynolds, starring George Dzunza. George Dzunza. George Dzunza, Jason Patrick, and Stephen Bauer. It was only released in 2 screens across the whole of the US by Columbia Pictures, and I kid you not when I say this is the best Hollywood film you've never heard of. Quentin Tarantino's old writing partner Roger Avery has it down as the best movie of 1988 on his Letterboxd. Someone's been stalking Roger Avery on his Letterboxd, it sounds like. Nick, stay away from Roger Avery. He is not your friend. I don't know that about Roger. He might be. And he also has it down as one of his 20 desert island films, along with Apocalypse Now being the only other war film. The film has a rating of 7.3 on IMDb, 3.5 on Letterboxd, and not a single critic's review on Rotten Tomatoes, but it does have an audience score of 85%. I'm starting to get more and more podcasts to check it out and review it, while Letterboxd reviews seem to be on the increase now. I think it would be great if companies like Criterion or Shout Factory, etc., got their hands on it and gave it the exposure it clearly needs. Please seek this film out. It's available on DVD and streaming, so it won't be difficult to track down. And if you do see it, let me know if you agree with me that this might be one of the 10 best American movies of the 1980s. That is a large claim. That is a bold claim.
That's a bold statement, and I hate to say this, but there is zero way that this movie can back up that claim. There's no way.
Right.
There's no way that no one's ever heard of it, and it's the best movie of the 80s, or one of the best movies of the 80s.
But he rounds out his fantastic email. One way or another, we need to find a way to raise this movie's profile and prevent it from continual obscurity once and for all. All the best, Nick. Well, look, Nick, I have to say, first of all, thank you for listening. Secondly, thank you for writing in. And thirdly, this is a wonderful email, but the one thing you failed to mention is, are you in a shed? That's all we care about. All we care about is, are you writing this email in your shed? And if not, get thee to a shed immediately and send us another email. We only require shed-based listeners here at the After Movie Diner.
I agreed. You should be informing us whether or not you're in a shed. By the way, John, I do have a shed story, so buckle up, folks. I have a shed story for later. Also, Nick, I want to know how much money you have invested in this movie, because clearly you're trying to push it so hard. Yeah. Did you do one of those like retroactive, I've invested a bunch of money and I'm about to lose my shirt unless some people start reviewing this online and more people start streaming it or wherever? Yeah. That's what it sounds like to me. But also, more importantly, how much money did you invest in that shed? We need to know.
We need to know, how much did you pay for your shed? What color is your shed, and have you ever sat in your shed and listened to the After Movie Diner? And if not, why not get thee to a shed right now? Jay Mayo, you are a veteran. What is your take on war movies? Like them or don't like them?
You know, I like a lot of war movies, and I don't know if that is due to me being a war veteran or not, but there's certain war movies that really get to me, and I could care less about others. Certainly high on my list would be movies like Saving Private Ryan. There is, at no point have I ever watched that movie and did not get teared up towards the end of the movie when you see, Private Ryan, right. The character as an old man and asking his wife, did I lead a good life? Am I a good man? Like
spoilers for people.
Yeah, if you haven't seen Saving Private Ryan by now,
which is a 20-year-old movie, I think.
Apparently, your name is Nick, and you write in from a shed. Yeah. But yes, there are certain movies. The Dirty Dozen, I love that movie. Yeah. But that's more nostalgic. Like I watched that with my grandfather when I was a kid, and he was really into it, and that got me into it. So I don't know if that it has a lot to do with me having lived that life in reality or not, but yes, there are plenty of war movies that I do in fact like.
Good, excellent. I just wondered if it would be if we were to cover the beast of war. Whether that would be something that you and I should do, whether you would have a unique perspective on war movies, or whether it should just be something I throw to Jim. That was all I was going to say.
Well, I'd be more than happy to do it. John, I think it's been well publicized on the After Movie Diner that I get furious at gun inaccuracies. So if you want me to do a deep dive on how inaccurate the live firing in this movie is, I'd be happy to.
I think that would be hilarious if we were being pimped this movie as one of the greatest American movies of the 80s with all these ratings and everything like that, and we watched it and all we did was spend the entire podcast just being like, nope, that gun doesn't fire that way.
What does he have, a magic amount of bullets? No one can shoot that many times in a row without reloading. That's ridiculous. That's what goes on in my head when I watch a war movie. Either I think to myself, well, that's inaccurate, or I'm not crying, you're crying.
It's like when I watch a music film, I can always tell when the actor is either not playing the guitar or piano or miming really badly. You know what I mean? And it's weird because there was a certain point in movie history where we didn't care. It's like stuntmen. There was a certain point in movie history we didn't care about seeing the stuntmen. Like when Roger Moore ran off screen and then suddenly a much trimmer, more muscular James Bond guy like grabbed hold of a helicopter and flew away. We were like, we know it's not Roger Moore, but it's fine. We'll suspend disbelief and it's James Bond and it's all good. However, then there became a point in movies where we were like, no, the actor must either do all their own stunts or we must use CGI to replace their face and make it look as much like them as possible, right? Same with faking musical instrument playing. There was a certain point where we didn't care. Like, as long as his hands were generally strumming somewhere near the guitar, we were like, all right, I buy that's happening. You know what I mean? One of your favorite films, La Bamba. I'm sure Lou Diamond Phillips did not play all of those songs.
No, absolutely not. And as a matter of fact, the band Los Lobos re-recorded all of Richie Valens' songs, and it was Los Lobos playing 100% of the music and singing it. It was just Lou Diamond Phillips just standing there pretending to do it himself. Yeah, lip-syncing the whole time.
I think it would be hilarious if you made a music biopic and every time it cut to the guy playing the instrument, it was clearly someone else, not someone else's hands, but someone else's hands through his arms. Like you could, like, you know, when you stand behind someone and put your hands through their arms. If it was like that obvious and no one ever commented on it.
I would love that. That would be my favorite new thing. That would be the move. That's Nick's equivalent of The Beast, right? Like that would be our equivalent. We'd be like, well, obviously this is the greatest movie of the 2000s era because, I mean, what could possibly be better than stringing your arms through someone else's arms to play an instrument?
Right. And not because even the best guitarist in the world, given that awkwardness, would not be able to like really. So it wouldn't even help. Like, it wouldn't even make the playing better. It would just make the whole thing more awkward.
You know what would be even better than that? Let's double down on this. Let's cast real musicians and have the musicians put their arms behind their back, and then
actors
have stuntmen behind them.
Yeah. I love it.
Putting their arms around them and attempting to play the instrument. I like that idea even better.
Yeah, even funnier if they crossed the gender. So if it was like a Joni Mitchell biopic, but it was like a big, burly, hairy-armed stuntman who was doing the guitar. That would be phenomenal. I would be all about that, and that's my new favorite thing that we need to make happen at some point. But no, I think it was probably, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Sean Penn in Sweet and Lowdown. I think that was one of the first times I saw an actor in a movie perfect miming. He's not playing. Like, if you handed Sean Penn the guitar, I'm sure it wouldn't sound like the sort of the Django Reinhardt type thing that he's playing, but he learned how to mime it like expertly. And then you cut to something like La La Land or whatever, where you can't even see the join. Like, it looks like he's really playing that piano with all the kind of jazz verve and style that's possible. And you know, we've progressed, right? It's like special effects progress, stuntmen progress, and so on. However, I don't think gun accuracy has progressed in movies. I'm sure you watch modern movies and they're like, nope.
Absolutely. There's very few movies that take the legitimacy and the accuracy of firearms usage. They take it seriously because in most movies, it's not about the use of the gun. It's about the idea of having a gun and shooting it, right? It's not about being accurate. It's not about what type of gun you have, what the practical use of that particular gun is. It's about, isn't this flashy, bang, 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 that's scary, it's adding to the whatever, the action or the suspense or whatever it is. So in a movie like the John Wick series, they took a little bit of time to try to make it more accurate. And I don't know if that was intentional or if Keanu Reeves just takes the role serious and is like, I'm going to make this look as real as possible. I hope it's both. But you'll notice in the John Wick series that when John picks up a gun, he doesn't just start firing. He looks to see if it's loaded. He looks to see how many bullets are left. When he shoots the 4 or 5 rounds, then the gun's empty and he's like, oh shit, what do I do now? And he like throws it at them or what, like he doesn't have the magic bullet theory or any of that stuff that most of modern movies or even older movies do.
Yeah. I mean, I remember there's an alternate ending of Army of Darkness, the one that's in the supermarket store, and he has a double-barreled shotgun, just a 2-cartridge double-barreled shotgun, and he fires that sucker like 58 times without reloading.
Like, come on, what are you like? This is ridiculous. So yes, most movies, they don't take legitimate firearms usage seriously. But I do appreciate when some movies do. Again, the John Wick series comes to mind.
Well, he did a lot of training, right? I mean, there's video footage of him on gun ranges training with like tactical teams and the right movements and all the rest of it. Because it's not just about, are there bullets? What's the weight of the gun? How is he holding it? But it's also about how he moves with it. Who's standing where, blocking out the scene, all that kind of stuff, like tactically figuring it out.
Absolutely. And so a little history of myself and the firearms industry within the film industry. I worked for a firearms manufacturer for many years, and I used to supply a prop house with blank firing firearms during that time. And in speaking with some of the prop masters and the instructors that worked for that company, I'm led to believe that anyone that works with a firearm on a Hollywood set has to go through a certain level of training. It's usually basic firearm safety. Not everyone goes to the extreme like Keanu Reeves had done for that particular set of movies where they go through tactical classes, and I'm sure he went through the whole gamut of all different types of firearms and all different types of training. But from what I understand, as a part of the union, they have to go through a safety training, firearm safety training, in order to handle a firearm on a set, which is nice. I think that's appropriate. But that also leads me to believe, what the fuck happened in between your firearm safety class where you handle the gun and then you're on screen and you're like, this seems like I've never done this before.
Yeah, no, I don't understand. But except that I'm sure, someone somewhere is like, time is money. Just run at the guy firing the thing, shout a couple of lines and move on,
Right.
But, and I've got to believe that like what sadly happened with someone like Brandon Lee or whatever must have had an impact on how much training and how much safety and all that kind of stuff goes on these days versus, you look at some of the 80s movies, 70s movies that were made that were kind of very gun heavy, either the gangster movies of the 70s or the full-blown muscle-bound action movies of the 80s. You've got to believe that there was probably a lot less safety involved in a lot of those movies, just based on the rate that they were kind of shitting them out at the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Unfortunately, the Brandon Lee situation, I'm sure that led directly to them no longer using just regular guns and then being like, oh, yeah, we need to remember to bring the blanks in. Like, yeah, no. Like, there's a lot of very strict, like, they're very specific guns made for movie sets now.
Yeah.
That can't function like a normal gun. And so hopefully a Brandon Lee situation will never happen again.
Yeah.
But I mean, who knows what happens like overseas? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine most of the time now all the muzzle flashes and stuff like that are done, with CGI and everything now. I mean, I imagine there's probably, if you watched footage, it's like when you watch footage from a disco or a dance sequence and there's no music and all you can hear is like the feet on the floor and the back of I'm sure it's like that now where you don't even hear any noises or anything. One last point on this subject before we move on, J. Mayo. If you are a stickler for gun usage in movies, how do you feel about the old action movie chestnut of if a car so much as brushes something, it immediately explodes? Like
I think I think it has its moments.
Yeah.
As we all know, I'm a huge Troma fan, and there is one reoccurring scene in most Troma movies where they bought some stock footage of a car flipping over and blowing up, and I love silly
right.
cars blowing up.
Yes,
I mean, like Fast and Furious. That's not particularly for me. That's fine. I get the appeal to that. But yeah, I mean, a ridiculous car blowing up, I'm for that for sure, especially if I don't care for the characters that are driving that car.
Right, exactly. I think it's so I've seen it happen with cars like a bunch, but there is a Cynthia Rothrock movie called Guardian Angel that was, I think, her only PM Entertainment movie, and PM Entertainment were like the low-budget version of Canon films. So they didn't even bother to have like glossy cinematography or whatever. They basically put 90% of their budget into stunts, the other 10% of their budget into a martial artist. So whether that's Don the Dragon Wilson, Cynthia Rothrock, Jeff Speakman, one of those kind of second-tier martial arts action stars. And that was their movie as far as they were concerned. So they just, there's a bunch of things. One of my favorites is the C. Thomas Howell movie. I think it's called The Sweeper, where he's driving along and a guy is driving in front of him in a flatbed truck, and he is throwing burning barrels of oil off the back of his truck, like almost like Donkey Kong or something, like just constantly throwing barrels off the back of his truck. And C. Thomas Howell is having to like avoid them, and they're blowing up other cars like behind C. Thomas Howell, like on the highway. That's one of my favorites. But my other favorite is at the end of Guardian Angel. We've all seen a car blow up just because it like dinks a tree or something and it just explodes into flame, which I have got to imagine that would be a safety hazard. But at the end of Guardian Angel, it's a speedboat chase, and the speedboat like barely grazes a rock with the front of the speedboat. And if you know anything about speedboats, the engine isn't at the front. Like I hate to break it to some people, the engine is not at the front of a speedboat. But this speedboat like dinks a rock, right, with the pointed front tip of the speedboat, and just the whole thing explodes into flame. And it's one of my favorite moments because of just how utterly inaccurate it is and ridiculous it is.
I love a good ridiculous boat blowing up.
Yeah.
I like when a boat goes from the water to the land for no reason, when there's like a jump in the water and you're like, well, how is this going to go? There's a guy driving alongside a speedboat and then the boat jumps out of the water.
Yeah.
Shit like that. Oh, I'm for that.
There's a Roger Moore James Bond movie. I want to say it's Live and Let Die, because I think it's where they've got the comical fat southern sheriff who then shows up again in one of the later ones. But I think he comes out of a bayou in a speedboat, Roger Moore does, goes across a freeway or a highway at least, and then like at least a 3-lane road in a boat, which wouldn't happen because the engine has to be in the water to propel the boat. Like you can't just like the sheer force of will propel it. Like a boat hits land and just stops. Like it doesn't, but this scoots over the highway, narrowly missing the comical fat southern sheriff who probably like, what in the Sam Hill? And then the boat hits another bayou the other side of the road and just keeps going.
Of course. Did the sheriff do like a double take and spill his coffee as well? Like
Probably.
I feel like that needed to be put in.
That probably happened. Although knowing it being a Roger Moore James Bond movie, they could have even had a double taking pigeon, which happens again. Another boat coming out of the water in Moonraker. His gondola is a magic gondola that converts into a car and allows him to drive the gondola through the streets of Venice. And while he does that with like comical music playing and stuff like that, there is a double-taking pigeon like in the movie. That's phenomenal that there was a point where a massive studio action movie, part of a, 40-year, 50-year franchise, like one of the biggest franchises of movies literally on the planet, and they were like, sure, put in a double-taking pigeon. Let's just do that in Moonraker, because we're going to take Bond to space anyway, so let's just make the stuff that's set on Earth mad and have a double-taking pigeon. And who doesn't love it?
Here's my Jim moment. Do you think that they were sitting in the editing bay and they were like, you know what this movie needs? What's that? We need more pigeons in this movie. And they're like, yeah, but we have some pigeons already. And they're like, wait for it. A double-taking pigeon.
A double-taking pigeon.
And that guy pissed his pants.
Yeah.
He was like, I cannot contain my piss anymore. I cannot. That was the most brilliant thing anyone has ever said.
Ever.
We might as well get our tuxedos ready because we are going to win every award there is in the history of film.
Yeah. I would love to find out that Moonraker won Best Editing that year. I would absolutely love that.
Yep, and the guy showed up with a piss-stained tuxedo. We all know that.
So anyway, with the preamble already 30 minutes in, let's start talking about the movie Diner. And this episode is a tie-in to the Steve Guttenberg. Oh my God, Jay, we have a Steve Guttenberg interview on After Movie Diner. Are you excited or are you excited?
John, my nipples are about sticking through the computer.
Yes, I am so phenomenally excited that we have the Goots on the After Movie Diner website, aftermoviediner.com. And this is the point in the show when I urge everyone to right now subscribe to Booth Talk from the After Movie Diner. You'll find it wherever the After Movie Diner is. So whatever podcast platform you're listening to this show on, literally look at related shows or, shows similar to, and you will find Booth Talk. Either that or you can go to aftermoviediner.com and find Booth Talk there. But either way, subscribe to Booth Talk because we have interviews galore. We've spoken to Robert Wuhl from Batman. We've spoken to Keith Coogan from Don't Tell Mum, The Babysitter's Dead and Toy Soldiers. We've got a Beautiful Girls Max Perlich interview coming up, which is very exciting. And, of course, Steve Guttenberg tying in with today's episode, all about the movie Diner from 1982. But before we get into Diner and to give everyone listening time to go away, take a piss, and subscribe to Booth Talk, here are some adverts. And we at the After Movie Diner do not endorse these adverts. These are adverts that I have to put in order to keep my Spreaker platform, the Spreaker platform that I use. I have to put these ads in to abide by their ruthless corporate overlording of this show, but also so that I don't have to scrounge money off the listeners every week. So put up with that. I hope it's a Geico ad, because fuck Geico. Fuck Geico in their stupid lizard face. And so I hope it's a Geico ad, because I just said fuck Geico. But listen to the ads. While the ads are going on, subscribe to Booth Talk, and then we'll be back talking about the 1982 Barry Levinson joint, Diner. We are back. Jay Mayo, how was your break? Did you enjoy that?
It was one of the best breaks I've ever taken in my entire life, John. And might I also say, I individually do not like any of those sponsors as well. So whatever you just heard,
fuck them.
I don't endorse them personally, and as a part of this show, I don't endorse them. So
exactly.
Fuck Geico or whomever.
The only reason I would say yay to those ads is because I don't have to pay to host the show, host it on a server. That's the only reason that I would say, okay, yes to those ads. But the companies that made those ads, no, I don't endorse any of those whatsoever. But I do. No. Do you know what I do endorse, Jay Mayo? Do you know what I do endorse?
Do you endorse Steve Guttenberg?
I endorse Steve Guttenberg very much. I endorse him. I rigorously endorse him. But I also rigorously endorse Jay Mayo over at Hold the Mayo podcast on Patreon. Why don't we, as we're in an advertising mood, why don't we actually benefit our guest today and briefly tell everyone where they can find Hold the Mayo podcast on Patreon?
Hi, everybody. It's me, Jay Mayo, the host of Hold the Mayo podcast. You can find my shows, plural, at patreon.com/holdthemayopod. You can find brand new episodes of Hold the Mayo, my ongoing podcast, which started in 2014. We're up to episode 232 as of right now, so you can get brand new episodes. You can get the entire back catalog. You can also find a separate motivational self-improvement podcast called Be Better.
Absolutely fantastic. I recommend it to everybody.
Thank you, John. And there's all kinds of cool stuff over at Patreon. There's a whole bunch of different tiers, including but not limited to digital downloads, exclusives, merch, all kinds of stuff. Again, go to patreon.com/holdthemayopod.
And I am currently subscribing to Hold the Mayo and supporting them on Patreon. And I strongly, strongly urge, with the strongest of breaths, that everyone who listens to this show does exactly the same thing and supports Hold the Mayo, because Jay Mayo is phenomenal. His podcasts are fantastic. And Patreon now has a really nice app. Back in the day, it was difficult to listen to the shows natively in Patreon, but now you can just download the app for free and listen to the shows, baby! I did it last night. Jay's latest podcast, Hold the Mayo podcast, is phenomenal. I was in complete agreement with his dogs on leashes rant, as I myself am a dog owner who always leashes his dog when walking around the Brooklyn neighborhood in which he lives. However, have come across on more than one occasion, Jay, just wandering the streets of New York, entitled hipster douchebags with their dogs off a leash, and whenever I say, could you please leash your dog because my dog is old and blind and gets easily scared and doesn't want to encounter your dog or have your dog sniffing it, they always go, but it's trained. And I'm like, it's trained for you. It's not necessarily trained for my dog. Anyway, I'm not going to go down that route, except to say, if you don't leash your dog where other dogs or other people might be around, you are scum of the earth. And I'm just gonna say that right now. Leash your and while you're at it, leash your children as well. Just leash anything that might run randomly out in front of me.
And for more rants like that, go to patreon.com/holdthemayopod.
Yes, indeed. Anyway, I hope you've all subscribed to Booth Talk. I know that Jay Mayo subscribed to Booth Talk as I was saying it, because he's such a fan of the show. And I know that you're all going to want to hear our Steve Guttenberg episode all about the movie Diner. But now, listen to Jay Mayo and I talk about the movie Diner. So Jay Mayo, while Diner has long been a favorite of mine, and obviously is dear to my heart due to the fact that the show is called after movie Diner. Have you ever seen the movie Diner before today, sir?
No, I have never seen the movie until today. I literally watched it mere hours ago for the very first time. And I feel like it's the kind of movie I definitely should have watched before today. But between the cast and the plot and the setting, all of it is stuff that I'm into. I mean, I enjoy pretty much all of the actors in the movie, and I've seen plenty of movies of this type and from that era, so I feel a little ashamed to say that today was my first viewing.
No, but this is fantastic, because it means that because Jim was too pathetic, too tired and overworked to come on to...
Whoa. Pathetic, maybe.
I'm joking.
Tired, definitely.
I'm joking. I'm totally joking. I love you, Jim. But because Jim couldn't be on the show, you got the opportunity to discover Diner for the first time, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts, because it's such a fun movie to discover for the first time, while also being, for someone like myself, an old rental favorite. It was definitely one that when you didn't know what you wanted to rent in the video store, even though you'd seen it before, let's rent Diner. It's just a good time. It's a good... Like, you put it on, you're taken to a place, you get to hang out with a bunch of guys and a couple of lasses, and it's all good fun. fun. It's got a little bit of commentary on the Battle of the Sexes. It's got a little bit of throwback nostalgia with the 50s music and the 50s cars. It's got a phenomenal ensemble cast. And then, it's set in a diner, Jay, in a diner. And who doesn't love diners? Do you know who loves diners and has two thumbs? This guy. He called his website After Movie Diner.
Well, I certainly knew it wasn't Jim Wallace because he didn't even show up today. So clearly it had to be you.
Yes. But no, this has long been a favorite. It's funny. We're talking about this week, and we're talking about Beautiful Girls, which turns 25 this year, I believe. And we are doing a live stream on Saturday, February 6th with Scott Toomey, your friend and mine, Scott Toomey, and my wife, Kimberly Cross, and we will be over at the After Movie Diner Facebook group talking about Beautiful Girls. And it's funny because Diner and Beautiful Girls would make a great double bill. They've got a lot of the same kind of themes. It's got a lot of that kind of like old guys from the neighborhood getting together to kind of, talk through life and be able to kind of talk freely and share their neuroses and share their opinions and share what's happening with their lives. It's got Unlucky in Love. It's got Lucky in Love. It's got the Battle of the Sexes, as they said. It's sort of got a lot of the same themes. And again, a great ensemble cast. So who doesn't love that back to back? And it's just fortuitous due to the interviews that we happen to have had lined up for the show that we're able to talk about the two movies back to back. So let's get into it. It is a movie from 1982, as I said. It's by Barry Levinson, and I think it's his directorial debut, at least his studio movie directorial debut, I think. Let me just double check. It is. He did make a TV movie in 1978 called Peeping Times, and I don't know what that's all about. But this was indeed his debut feature film movie of the filmmaker Barry Levinson, who people will know from movies such as Rain Man, Wag the Dog, Bugsy, things like that. It takes place in Baltimore. It centers around a group of kind of college grad or college age people kind of coming of age and moving into adulthood. One of the main characters, played by the Goots, this week's guest on Booth Talk, is struggling with the idea of getting married and decides to set his wife-to-be a ridiculous quiz all about football, American football, which sort of, that kind of becomes the wraparound story for the movie in a way. And in turn, that kind of pushes the Daniel Stern character to kind of evaluate his marriage and evaluate what's important to his life, because he obviously married young and is now kind of looking at his other friends kind of getting into japes and scrapes and affairs of the heart and wondering, what's important to him, and is it the same thing that's still important to his wife. You have Mickey Rourke, who is sort of forever the kind of drifter Lothario, kind of bouncing from job to job and woman to woman, all the time with a gambling debt hanging over his head. And then the cast is rounded out by Kevin Bacon, who is the kind of alcoholic, drug taker, wild kid, won't grow up, one of the group. And Paul Reiser, who is more of the kind of schlub who hangs around the diner making wisecracks. He doesn't really have kind of a storyline per se. He's just kind of the comic relief in each of the scenes that he appears. And then Tim Daly, who is the older brother of Guttenberg, who's coming back for said nuptials and can't quite believe what is going on with Steve quizzing his wife-to-be about football.
Is Tim Daly Guttenberg's brother, or is he just his close friend? It made it seem like they weren't related.
Oh, maybe
especially,
not.
Especially when Tim Daly shows up to Guttenberg's house in the first time you see Guttenberg's house and that he still lives at his parents' house. It seemed like I think the Guttenberg's mother said your parents are on vacation, but they'll be here for the wedding.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. Thank you very much, Jay Mayo, who just watched the movie. Yes, you're right. He is maybe a friend of theirs, or he's maybe
has to be like a very close friend, because essentially he just walks into their house and
right.
Guttenberg's mother's just like, yeah, come on in, like he's one of the family.
And maybe that's where I got confused. But he's a very, very good friend, and he's away at school, right?
Correct. Yeah, I think everyone else of that group
is he trying
went
to be a lawyer?
Locally.
Is he trying to be a lawyer or trying to be a doctor? He's at a school where you have to be at school for longer, isn't he?
Yeah, and so he had to take the train in from wherever he's going to school. So I guess we're to presume that it's not in that Baltimore neighborhood. We're to assume that it's elsewhere. As to where, I think they made mention in one of the scenes in the diner of University of Pennsylvania or Maryland or something. And because Mickey Rourke says oh yeah, I'm going there because I'm going to go to law school. So we're to assume that Tim Daly doesn't go to that school if he has to take the train from wherever he is.
Right. Yeah, and it doesn't go into too many details. And although I did watch this recently, Jay Mayo, sort of in the last month or so, those kind of details escape me. I'm more there for the humor and the camaraderie than necessarily how they all fit into each other's lives, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
I just assume they all know each other. But the key thing about this film, the key wonderful thing, is the ensemble cast and the chemistry between each of them, and the relatability that all of them have. You know what I mean? They all display traits that we can probably all see within ourselves. Even when they display an extreme trait, you might go, I have a bit of that. Like, I understand that guy. I get where he's coming from, Jay. I get why Kevin Bacon got drunk and naked and lay in the nativity scene outside the church. I get it. I understand. We've all been there, right, Jay Mayo?
Absolutely. I do that regularly, and the church has stopped putting up the nativity because of me, but I continue to do it anyway.
Continue to do it anyway. In fact, you build the nativity out of Play-Doh and just lie on top of it. Probably one of the most iconic scenes to come out of this movie is better known as the popcorn trick, which I've got to imagine that actually in reality, like, this is another one of those things where you totally accept the idea that he is able to surreptitiously unzip and force his erect member into the bottom of a cardboard popcorn container. But when I think about the actual logistics of that, Jay Mayo, it's got to at least scratch the old chap a little bit. You know what I mean? It's not like cardboard, the foldable cardboard at the bottom of a popcorn container is, smoothly rounded off.
No, there's a lot of, let's compare this to what we were talking about earlier. There's a lot of technical issues that are going on with this whole dick in the box situation here. First and foremost, you are going to destroy your penis trying to force it through the bottom of a full box of popcorn.
Yes.
Not only is there popcorn in the way, there is also the cardboard folded on itself.
Yes.
That's like the strongest point because all of the points come. So now you have to put your penis through that.
Yeah.
Ouch. Hey, let's talk about salt for a moment. You think that feels good?
No.
Rubbing up against your penis that you've just forced through cardboard? Probably not. And maybe worst of all, who wants popcorn butter on their dick?
Yes.
No one.
No one does.
No one.
No one does.
No one. That's never coming off,
no.
by the way. That's permanent.
That's permanent. And there will be stainage on the front of your pants zipper. Not only that, Jay, and again, I don't want to dwell too long or too hard or look too hard on the member protruding through the bottom of a popcorn bucket, but he becomes aroused with zero stimulus. And I don't care, like, what your imagination is like. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying, Jay? Like, for him to just involuntarily get an erection that is hard enough for him to push through the bottom of a popcorn bucket without anyone noticing, without any stimulus. That's, you know what I'm saying, Jay?
Yes. In 1959, there was no Viagra. So, yeah, that would be nearly impossible. Now, to his credit, and for his explanation, trying to get the girl to go back into the movie with him.
That was phenomenal. That was phenomenal.
There was a scene where the actress on screen lifted up her dress because she went through some, whatever, thorn bushes or something.
Right.
And she was showing the guy that, I got some scratches here in my upper thigh. So, yes, okay, maybe, just maybe, that was enough for him to start the process. But no way was that enough for him to go from 0 to 100. Yeah. And by 100, I mean forcibly smashing his penis through a cardboard box full of popcorn. Yeah. Absolutely not.
However, it becomes the iconic scene. It becomes the scene that when you are a kid coming of age yourself, and people are like, have you seen the movie with the popcorn trick in it? Long before Dick in a Box, long before Andy Samberg came up with Dick in a Box, there was, let's just say, playground chatter about the movie that featured the Dick and the popcorn trick. You immediately wanted to see that film, Jay. You were like, how does that even work? I want to see that movie.
Exactly. It was American Pie before American Pie. It was Dick in a Box before SNL did Dick in a Box. It was all of those things where you're like, well, that's ridiculous. Absolutely.
And interestingly, because this movie comes out around about the same time as Porky's comes out, and obviously Porky's would start a wave of either high school or college-based sex romp movies, which were kind of both titillation, softcore film, as well as kind of comedies, in inverted commas. There was some pressure by the studio and the executive producers of this film to make it more like Porky's. And even though the popcorn trick is apparently based on a story that Barry Levinson did hear from the group of friends that this is based on, because this is very much based on Levinson's upbringing and the friends he had around him, and therefore it wasn't put in there to Porky-ize the movie. The studio wanted to lean more on Porky-like content, and there was actually big pushback by Levinson and the cast not to do that, because it's not the point of the movie, Jay, although we did just mention it quite a bit and go quite deep into it. It's not the point of the movie. But it did, however, certainly when I was an adolescent and hearing about certain movies for the first time, it was one of those movies that people like, you got to see the Dick in the Box movie. You know what I mean?
Right. I wonder how much of those Porky-type ideas they floated past Levinson, and how much that would have changed. Again, I'm doing another Jim moment here. And I wonder how much that would have changed the movie. Had they put in a bunch of Animal House or Porky's or whatever style ridiculous sex romp tropes into this movie, I wonder if we would have looked at it as an American Pie type of movie more so than Beautiful Girls, where it's dialogue based and you get something from each one of the characters.
Yeah, I think it's wise they didn't go that way. I mean, there are a couple of scenes that, there's the scene we're talking about with Mickey Rourke and the popcorn, and then there's the sequence where you think that Mickey Rourke, Ellen Barkin is going to cheat on her husband, Daniel Stern, with Mickey Rourke. And not only that, but you think that they're going to be hiding in the closet to witness said cheating.
Right.
And so there is a setup that maybe there is going to be that sequence, but that sequence never does emerge. And really, Rourke is the only one who has any kind of remotely kind of sexual storyline, or storyline that has any kind of sexual connotations. Everyone else's storyline is about them wrestling with sort of their own either insecurities, neuroses, or demons. The other thing I really wanted to bring up and talk about that is brought up in both Guttenberg's character, but also off the back of it, Daniel Stern's character, is an idea that would be most famously floated later on in the movie and book High Fidelity, which is the idea that books, movies, sports, you name it, these things that are considered hobbies or interests, they're actually a lot more important to people than people want to give them credit for. And I know that we live in a world where now you can form a Facebook group or form a Twitter community or go online and spit and hit a blog that'll be talking about your favorite obscure movie or your favorite sports team or your favorite random vinyl musician or whatever it is. But back in the day, Jay, that was not the case. And one had to kind of hold on to one's interests and loves as much as they could. And there is a reoccurring theme in a lot of these films that a relationship and or a marriage and or some version of the battle of the sexes is going to come in and break up your love of fill in the blank, movies, sports, music, what have you. Have you ever, without getting too personal about your life, have you ever found that, Jay? Have you ever been in either a relationship or a friendship or a family scenario where your loves of music and movies and hiking and sports and whatever have come between you and someone else?
Oh, absolutely. I had a relationship end because I became a stand-up comedian, and I put all of my time and effort and focus into that career. And I had a long-term, several years relationship. We lived together, and we were making that, much like this movie, we were making that natural trajectory towards, getting married and, settling down and doing the whole thing. And because, not unlike Daniel Stern's character, where he's trying to explain to his wife, like, hey, these aren't just records to me. Like, this means a lot more to me than just, putting the record back in the correct place. Like, this is a big deal to me. That I lived that. I had that with a career. It wasn't just a hobby anymore. It went from, hey, isn't this really funny, to now I'm the person up there making all of those people laugh, and you are the one that talked me into following my dreams, and now all of a sudden my dreams are interfering with our relationship. And that's hard. It really is hard. Yeah. And I've had it on a smaller level, and that's certainly like the biggest level is having a years-long relationship end because of your passion, which for me turned into a career. But yeah, it sucks. I totally saw portions of my own personality in each one of these characters for sure. But more specifically, the Daniel Stern character, when he kind of has this little breakdown there with the whole putting the records back in the right order, and he's trying to explain to his wife that it's not just a hobby to me. I get that for you, it's just I want to hear the record, but for me, it's a whole different thing. Like, this means so much to me, and the fact that you don't understand how much this means to me is more frustrating than you not putting the record back where I wanted you to put the record back. Like, right. I've felt all of those emotions in my own life, for sure. Right.
And by the way, before anyone listening to this thinks that we're purely talking about this from a male perspective, that's mainly because we're two men, but also because...
Speak for yourself.
Jay is in the process of transitioning at the moment. But the other thing is that, women have exactly the same kind of loves and interests on their side that I'm sure they've come across either men or other women who have not understood the same thing, whether it's the female movie geek who may have female friends who are like, I don't understand your love of movies or horror movies or whatever. And again, I'm generalizing. Please don't jump on my generalities. I'm just generalizing to say that I understand it's not just guys who have this scenario. But also women who might be in relationships with men who are sports fanatics and women who are movie fanatics or whatever it is, or book fanatics or cooking fanatics or whatever it is, that doesn't gel. It's a hobby or an interest that does not gel with their respective other, whoever that may be. And it can be, if you are not accommodating, if you are not understanding, and if you do not occasionally take yourself out of the scenario on both sides, it can be a real thing. And I understand it happens on both sides, so please do not think that us just talking about our own experiences is negating the fact that it doesn't happen the other way around. Of course it happens the other way around, and I acknowledge that. But going forward, Jay and I will be talking about our own experiences about it.
Because we can only talk about our own experiences about it. We don't have another point of view. Furthermore, we're talking about a movie where most of the plot line follows the men of this movie and not the wife in one particular scenario and the fiance, who, by the way, you never see her face throughout the movie, which I found to be very strange.
Yeah, you never see Steve Guttenberg's wife's face throughout the movie, even at their wedding, which sort of is the finale of the movie.
Right.
But taking it to the scene in question where Daniel Stern, goes off at Ellen Barkin about his records, what I love about that scene is that it is both played, written, and acted in a way that you understand and accept both sides of that argument. Daniel Stern is being a level of unreasonable about his records. However, he has every right to be passionate about his records. Equally, Ellen Barkin is completely right. You take records out to listen to them, like listen to the records. I do not have to be as engaged and anal about your records as you are. That's for you to be, not for me to be. That's not my bag baby, as it were. However, she should respect the fact that he is passionate about his records. So what I love about that scene is you kind of see both sides. You can kind of agree and understand on both sides. And while Daniel Stern's flip out is played maybe a little bit for laughs, for you to kind of detach yourself from the scenario and watch it with a bit of a chuckle, because he is being ridiculous, it does speak to a very interesting dilemma that I think a lot of couples face, especially younger, either first or second relationship type couples who think, oh, maybe this is the one. And then they find that whatever that stumbling point is.
Yeah, I think it also speaks to the cautionary tale of high school sweethearts. Just because you grew up together and everything seems perfect when you're young, sometimes it's difficult to see what's going to be in the future. And then you realize as you become adults and as your lives start to change, you realize oh, maybe this isn't the person that I thought they were, or maybe I'm not the person that I thought I was going to be. And maybe I don't get why you make such a big deal about records, and maybe I never will understand why you make such a big deal about records. And I think what I really took from that whole interaction, and including the scene where Daniel Stern is talking to Steve Guttenberg about his marriage, because Steve Guttenberg asks him about if he's happy in his marriage and how it's going, and Daniel Stern once again has a little bit of a breakdown where he says when we were kids, it was just about having sex and when are your parents going to be gone and can we find a secluded area and all that. And now that we're adults and we can do it whenever we want, it's well, what's the point? And then those are real thoughts that real people have. Real young couples really have those thoughts. Real marriages face that exact thing of, oh no, we finally got to that point where we got married and we settled down and all of that, and I guess this is it.
Yeah.
This isn't exciting. We're not kids. It's the same. It's routine. Why did we do this? And I've certainly felt that. I know many people have felt that.
Yeah, and it's funny. I went through 3 long-term relationships that basically play out like that. 2 or 3 years into it, it was wait, you haven't changed and you still like all of the things you did like. We assumed, or I assumed, that you, John, would either grow up or change or stop liking this stuff or stop this stuff being important to you or whatever it is, and you haven't stopped liking these things or doing these things or even spending time with these people. Because that's another thing, is it's often, why do you have to spend time with these people? That can often be a complaint as well. And what you do, Jay, having had that kind of experience and having had a bunch of failed things under your belt and having, made sure that you yourself have done all that you can to accommodate the other person's interests or whims or hobbies or whatever they are. And therefore, there's no guilt on your side that you treated them the same way that they're treating you. The only thing you can do, and I think if there is any quote-unquote growing up that people do, it's actually more about acknowledging who you are, owning who you are, being proud of who you are, and then but not being arrogant about it, and not being shitty about it, and not being a dick about it, but being able to sit across from someone as a mature person and say, these are the things I'm into. And they're not going away. Like, don't expect 10 years in, 20 years in, that suddenly I go, you know what, playing guitar is not for me. I know I did it for the first 40 years of my life, but it's not for me anymore. That's not going to happen. You know what I mean? That's always going to be a part of who you are or whatever. So I think it's good to own your, right? People always talk about like own your shit, right? And they're often talking about your baggage or your negativity or the bad parts of your personality. Like own it, acknowledge it, and apologize for it and move on. But I think the same goes for all the positive things about yourself. Own what you love to do. And when you meet someone, just be like, hey, I'm into these things. And when I say I'm into these things, I don't mean, oh, I put it on my dating profile to sound important. I'm into these things like they are my lifeblood. And you must, either accept them or acknowledge them. And in the same way that I will openly accept and acknowledge the things that are your lifeblood, and we will incorporate and compromise like mature, loving people. Or just say, no, not for me. Great, excellent. At least we know now. At least it's not 5 years down the road, and the two people are sat there being like, he seems to still really like jazz records or whatever it is in the movie,
Right, yeah. And to tie it back into the movie, that's clearly what Steve Guttenberg was trying to do with that football test before he would allow her to marry him. What?
Yeah,
He devised
that's taking it to a level.
Test. Yeah, he was like, listen, I'm into football so hard that you have to pass a test in order for me to agree to allow you to marry me.
Only in the bananas. 50s, Jay.
But more so than that, everyone else was like, yep, that's what he's doing. And they just accepted it because they knew that's the kind of guy that Steve Guttenberg was. He's not just a casual football fan. That meant so much to him that he needed to ensure that whoever was going to marry him, whether it's his choice, her choice, or no one's choice, that she was going to be so into it and she understood how passionate he was about it, so that they didn't accidentally, not unlike Daniel Stern and his wife, they're not going to figure out a couple of years later, like, oh, maybe he's taking this a little too serious. Like, he was putting all of his cards on the table right ahead of time and like, listen, if you're going to marry me, you have to understand I'm a fucking weirdo about football. I need you to understand that I'm a fucking weirdo about football. And it'd be super groovy if you were as into it as I am, or at very least understand why I'm into what I'm into.
Now, I want to say, Jay, that my previous statement about owning your shit doesn't extend to forcing your fiance to take a quiz about your shit in order for there to be a wedding in the first place. I was not condoning that action.
True, but that's how hardcore Steve Guttenberg's character was about football. He rationalized that he had to give his fiance a football test, and she was required to pass, which, by the way, she doesn't pass, spoiler alert. But that was obviously a manifestation of his insecurities as well, right? So obviously that was his way of putting in like a trap door. Like, if things get a little bit too hard, I can just be like, last minute, sorry, you didn't pass the test, I'm out of here.
Well, also the thing I love about the scene where you finally do hear him giving the test behind closed doors is that in the little like basement bar hangout room of the house that they're all in, his dad is there, and his dad is like totally on board with what is happening. Like instead of his dad trying to talk about it, his dad's like, no, the Baltimore Colts are really important to us as a family, and in order for Elise, which is the name of Guttenberg's fiance, to be a part of this family, she better get this right. Not only that, but doesn't he throw in like a really hard curveball question? Like the dad wrote like a really hard curveball question.
Yeah, he wrote the two hardest questions. The two hardest. He's like, I wrote that one. That's one I wrote. But more so than that, everybody is on board. The mother comes down halfway through the test and said, Elisa's mom is on the phone. She wants to know how she's doing, which means all of the parents were on board with this, and they were all invested. Yeah. They're like, oh, man, I hope Elise studied, because otherwise she is fucked. Like, there was literally no other choice for this woman but to pass this test, because apparently Steve Guttenberg was the only human to exist that could possibly marry this woman.
Now, look, I am not trying to say that this week's guest on Booth Talk, Steve the Goots Guttenberg, is not worthy of, a quiz taker's love. But what I will say is this. There are more fish in the sea that don't quiz you on football. I just will Guttenberg. Also, if the rest of the movie proved to me as an audience member that, oh my God, I would marry Guttenberg. Like, if he was like, I don't know, some sort of charitable, giving, incredibly intelligent, wealthy, sexy, interesting, funny. Like, if he was like, oh my God, the perfect package up and down, you may go, all right, I guess why she's putting herself through this. But he's not. He's just a schlub in an overcoat.
Nope, he's just a regular guy that lives with his parents. That's it. He's just, we're presuming a college graduate, but doesn't work. It doesn't seem that anyone other than Mickey Rourke works. And we know Kevin Bacon has a tiny trust fund, but it seems that no one has a job.
Daniel works in the TV.
That's true. Yeah.
Electronics salesman.
Yeah. That's true. But apparently no one else works, including Steve Guttenberg. So, why would anyone throw themselves at the Goot? I don't know. But I'll tell you what. Steve Guttenberg in Police Academy wearing that little half shirt, I'd fucking marry that guy right now.
Yeah, the bun in the oven shirt or whatever it says.
Yes.
One in the oven.
Yes.
Fantastic.
That when I think of Steve Guttenberg, that's what I think of. And maybe that says a lot more about me than it does him, but that's what I think of.
And lastly, before we wrap this up, Jay, let's talk about some of the nostalgic elements that we both love in the movie. I obviously adore the diner. Now, that diner actually doesn't exist in that spot in real life. That was actually a diner that was brought down from New Jersey for the purposes of filming, I believe. However, it's a great diner. It's a good old-fashioned chrome-fronted, neon light diner with the old booths and everything. Oh my goodness, what a great diner. I would love to go to there. It reminded me a bit of what was the diner that we all went to? Was it Kit's or Cat's? We went to a diner. I forget when it was. It was you, me, Kim, and someone else. And I bought the T-shirt. It has like a white T-shirt with a mauve writing on it. Kit's.
Yeah. That's in Connecticut. I want to say it's like Pegs or something like that. Yeah,
it's like a three-letter word,
something like that. Or yes, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes,
that was a great diner. And then of course there was the famous diner episode that we did with you and me at another diner near you, where I was served up so many plates of meat, like 5 million sausages and 400 rashers of bacon and an egg.
Yeah. Yeah, that's Carl's Oxford Diner in Oxford, Massachusetts. I actually still refer to that as the John Cross order, and that is a food challenge in and of itself that I have attempted but never finished. I've come very close, but Carl's is world famous for giving you way too much food, and I tried to warn you, and you didn't believe me, and you ordered the most amount of food anyone has ever ordered there.
And that is now up on the menu officially as the John Cross After Movie Diner special?
Yeah, well, that's what I call it anyway. And when people ask me about going to Carl's, or if someone says that they have been or are planning to go to Carl's, I always try to give them the John Cross order as a personal challenge.
And I am trying to remember exactly. I know that it was the super motorbike movie with not Heather Locklear in it, but one of those types in it. Cyclone, that was it.
Yeah, Cyclone.
The Fred Olen Ray movie, Cyclone, episode 179, starring Heather Thomas. Not Heather Locklear, but Heather Thomas, a similar blonde Heather. And we were in Massachusetts together. We went there and we talked about Cyclone, starring Heather Thomas, Jeffrey Combs, and Martin Landau. And we ate at Carl's, where there was an incredibly large portion of food. And oh my God, what fun that was. But you will hear me and my gasps of wonder when that is served up in that very podcast. Check out episode 179 for that. How about you and the music, sir? I know you're a big 50s rock and roll doo-wop guy. This is 1959, so it's just on the cusp of the 60s coming in, but still very much in the rock and roll era. What did you feel about the soundtrack?
Yeah, man. If anything, if I were going to purchase any part of this movie, first and foremost, it would be the soundtrack. And not only did they have a decent soundtrack, but also, like, Daniel Stern's character was so into music, and there was a ton of music references throughout the movie. So, like, this really, I mean, there was a whole discussion about Frank Sinatra or Johnny Mathis, and then they're going back and forth, and finally they asked Mickey Rourke. They're like, "Well, which one do you prefer?" And he goes, "Well, Elvis, obviously." Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's just a ton. There was a Richie Valens reference, the La Bamba reference. Like, I mean, the whole movie is like classic rock and roll. I mean, there's even a ridiculous music scene at the strip club, which, if any scene could get cut from that movie, and I understand the whole, like, hey, this needs to be more like Porky's, let's put in a wacky strip club ridiculous scene.
Right. I'd forgotten about that scene till you mentioned it. Yeah, but you're right. The Tim Daly's character playing piano and Steve Guttenberg dancing like a fool with a stripper. Although, to be honest, it's one of those scenes that if you wanted to, like, pull it out and just watch it for its sheer bombast and lunacy, then that's the scene to watch, probably, because it's a lot of fun to watch the Goots get down. He's an awkward fellow at the best of times, so watching him try and shake a tail feather, that had its moment.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. It had very distinct tie to, like, Back to the Future, when Marty McFly is playing Johnny B. Good. Like, I felt like that, like, oh, white guy doing, like, quote unquote black music. Like, you know, when Tim Daly gets on stage and starts playing the piano, you're like, oh, I see what you're doing here. Like, you are clearly out of place doing what you're doing, and everyone's like, why is this guy doing it? But then they try to make it, like, fun and silly or whatever.
Well, what's hilarious is that the band in the strip club that they have is playing slow music. And it's Tim Daly who, out of all of the cast, Tim Daly is like the most boring one. Like, he's the least interesting of the cast. He doesn't really have a character other than being, you know, Gutenberg's wiser, sagier friend. But outside of that, like, he doesn't have, you know, the personality of Rourke or Kevin Bacon or even the wit of Paul Reiser. He's just a bloke. A guy, but the idea that he would be like, stand aside, I'm about to play Jerry Lee Lewis piano, right. You know, that in itself is hilarious. And then to watch Steve Guttenberg be like, I'm going to show everyone in here how to cut a rug.
I'm going to show everyone how to really strip, essentially, without taking my clothes off. And, okay, I have two more points. One, prior to that scene when they're just talking to each other and Steve Guttenberg is talking about how his arm fell asleep when he was trying to feel up the girl. Was that the world's oldest stripper on stage? She looked like she was in her 70s. Woof.
Jay, we don't judge. We don't judge here. We're a non-judgmental podcast. I'm all about the stripper who is, let's just say politely, up there in years. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I'm all about it. I'm actually all about it.
It made me uncomfortable to see someone's grandmother stripping, and also tying back into the awesome music and all the references from this movie. As we are recording this today is the anniversary of the day the music died, when Ritchie Valens and Buddy Holly and the Big Bopper died. And they didn't make a specific reference to that in this movie, but they did make reference to both Ritchie Valens and I believe that there is a Buddy Holly song on the soundtrack. So to tie it all together, I'm a big fan of all the music minus the whole strip club scene in this movie. Yeah, I loved it. I was kind of another aesthetically pleasing thing to me was all the cars. All the old cars were really cool in this movie. I was kind of hoping to see a couple of greasers in this movie, which you never really saw. Everyone was pretty straight-laced and city folk and whatever. I guess, you know.
You wanted like a Nogarelli from like Grease 2 or whatever showing up.
Something. I wanted someone with slick back hair, not a single one. And considering that there was, well, I guess there was the whole beauty parlor, but there was no dudes in there other than Mickey himself. So I suppose, and he was like the closest to being like a 50s greaser type.
Yeah.
He was the only one that
Can we talk about Mickey Rourke's eyeliner? Like, what was all that about? Okay. Like, his eyeliner was...
He was wearing eye makeup the whole movie. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. Ellen Barkin doesn't even have on as much eye makeup as Mickey does. Why does he have on so much eye makeup?
I don't know.
That was clearly his choice. And you know that was his choice.
But I'm there for it, Jay. If anyone should be leading the way in men wearing eye makeup, I'm glad that it's Mickey Rourke.
I think he started in 82 and just didn't stop ever wearing eye makeup. And let's also say, and I'm going to be mean here and say, 82, that's when people actually wanted to see Mickey Rourke's face, isn't it?
Yeah.
Nowadays, you look at it and you go, whoa.
After, let's just say, a long boxing career. Hence the face. But yes, no, you're right. But the eye makeup is something to behold. But the acting universally is fantastic. The soundtrack is great. There's some really fun standout scenes in it. I think it says a lot about relationships and friendships and things like that. And what I was going to say earlier is that a lot of people say like, every movie is about male relationships, give it up. However, what I would say is if you remove any movie that is an out-and-out comedy, because 9 times out of 10, out-and-out comedies of the like of, let's say, The Wedding Crashers or whatever, that purport to be about male friendships, I don't recognize myself in any of it. Like, I don't. Like, it's too far-fetched. It's too what I would call as a British guy, like blokey, laddish, whatever you would call it. I don't recognize any of that behavior whatsoever. This is more like, the male version. There's a lot of like female ensemble films about female friends and sort of the bond between female friends, and they're slightly more talky and slightly more intelligent and slightly more emotional and slightly more interesting. I kind of think of this movie like that. I think of this as sort of the male version of one of those kind of female ensemble films. So where it's, more dialogue driven, more character driven, more interesting, that kind of thing. So I have to be quick and wrap it up, Jay, now. Just 5 more minutes. But we have left Jim's questions right till the very end. And the reason why we've done that is because Jim always says when we get like questions from people in the group or whatever, leave it till the end of the episode so they have to listen to the whole episode in order to hear that question. So we're doing it to Jim.
We forced Jim to listen to his own questions. We got you.
We have to be it has to be a quick fire round with this one, Jay, so we can wrap it up because dinner is waiting, and boy, our stomachs are rumbling. But here are the 3 questions that Jim Wallace had for our current host, Jay Mayo. Here we go. Where is your favorite diner, Jay?
Carl's Oxford Diner in Oxford, Massachusetts.
Wonderful. Did you ever have a regular diner as a hangout, like a regular hangout with either a bunch of friends or veterans? Or
Absolutely, yeah. When I was in high school, we used to hang out at Bickford's in Woburn, Massachusetts, and then we sort of moved over to the IHOP in Revere, Massachusetts. But yes, most nights of the week we would be at a Bickford's. It's not really a diner. It's sort of like IHOP. It was like a local chain. But 24-hour diner, essentially, yes. Bickford's, Woburn, Massachusetts.
Nice. And the last question is, where is your favorite diner that you've ever recorded in?
Not technically a diner, but my favorite place to record in as a part of After Movie Diner, Stairway Cafe, North Conway, New Hampshire, is absolutely hands down my favorite place to consume breakfast and or talk movies with John Cross. And
the one thing I would say is that you had the pleasure of eating in what was hands down the greatest diner in New York City, Market Diner, before evil corporate overlords, my goodness, I'm saying that a lot lately, flattened the fucker to put up more apartment buildings that nobody fucking needs. But the Market Diner, what a diner. You and I recorded the La Bamba episode there, and that was a delight.
It certainly was. Yeah, I really enjoyed that diner. I have not been to a ton of diners in New York, but I would probably say that's my favorite diner in New York.
It was hands down my favorite. I once went in there and the busboy hugged me. It was that much of a familial, wonderful atmosphere, and the food was pretty great to boot. Anyway, we are going to wrap up now and say thank you ever so much, Jay Mayo, for your time today and for the discussion of Diner. This was a rip-roaringly good episode, a hum-dimbly-doo of a good time, or whatever it is you say. I messed that up, but I can't anymore. I'm too tired and too hungry. Jay, tell everyone where they can find you and how they should support Hold the Mayo on Patreon one last time, and then let's say good night.
Absolutely. You can find me all across social media at Hold the Mayo Pod. You can find the podcast at patreon.com/Hold the Mayo Podcast. You can send me an email, holdthemayo@gmail.com. John, thank you so much for having me. Jim, I hope I did you some justice attempting to fill in your shoes. And to all of the people listening right now, thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here.
That was the Beast of War, Jay Mayo himself. All right, sir. Thank you ever so much. Good night and speak soon.
Bye.
You guys want to pick up the beat or what? You gonna pick up the beat? You gonna pick up the beat?
Oh, it's a great start.